Good morning. Welcome to the Community Colleges of Baltimore County celebration of Constitution Week. My name is John Dede, Coordinator of Political Science here at CCBC Essex. This week we are celebrating the 224th anniversary of the writing of the United States Constitution. But we have also been reflecting over the past several days the anniversary of 9/11. Today's discussion by Senator Cardin should offer us a better understanding of both. It is the Constitution that we as Americans live by that has held our nation together since that September day. While questioned and debated, the Constitution is still the cornerstone of our republic. Now I would like to introduce Dr. Sandra Kurtenitis, President of our community college.
Good morning. Isn't it nice to see the sun for a change? Well, I am delighted to have the opportunity to introduce Senator Ben Cardin. The Washington Post has called Senator Cardin a legislator's legislator, which is indeed a very high accolade from the Washington Post. But he is referred to that way because he represents the best of what we would wish to find in those we send to Washington: sensible, tough-minded, and independent. He was a Maryland legislator. He's particularly qualified to talk to us today, I think. He was a Maryland legislator, having served not only as a representative, but as the Speaker of the House, and he has represented us in Congress for the past 20 years. He is a man who cares deeply about the well-being of all of us, the people he represents, and he works tirelessly on our behalf and is a national leader in those areas that actually are very important to each of us: the economy, healthcare, the environment, the well-being of retirees, and homeland security. So in the context of this week, Constitution Week, and the celebration yesterday of 9/11, the 10th anniversary of 9/11, he is a particularly apt speaker for our program today because when he was in the House of Representatives, he served on the Select Committee on Homeland Security, and now in the Senate, he is the chair of the Terrorism and Homeland Security Subcommittee of the Committee of Judiciary, and he reintroduced the Espionage Statutes Modernization Act and the Classified Information Procedures Reform and Improvement Act. This is government, remember, so lots of words. But those are important bills that would update critical national security laws to let the government protect us better from terrorism, espionage, and narcotics-related issues. You know, I often say that we at CCBC are blessed because we are in Maryland, we are in Baltimore County, and because we are represented by as fine a senator as any who sit in Washington, D.C. It is a very great pleasure for me to introduce Senator Benjamin Cardin, and I must say, in spite of all the rancor in Washington, D.C., he looks on a Monday morning very fit. So thank you for being here today. Help me welcome Senator Ben Cardin.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was going to try to cross this line if I can. Dr. Kurtenitis, thank you very much for the welcome here. It's great to be back here in Essex and at the community college. I thank you all. The reason I look so good is I was at the Ravens game yesterday. Wow, what a game. It's the first time I could leave a Ravens game early happy. I mean, it just doesn't happen. They always hold you to the end. So it was a very exciting day to start the season. But yesterday was also a very important day in our history, the 10th anniversary of the attack against our nation. And I think first and foremost, our thoughts are with the almost 3,000 people who were killed that day 10 years ago and their families. They were young and they were old. They were children, parents, and siblings. They were Christians, they were Jews, they were Muslims. There were Americans and there were foreigners. There were 50-some countries had casualties and deaths as a result of the attack of September the 11th. It was not an attack against one ethnic community or one group. It was an attack against our way of life. And we first offer our thanks to the first responders, the police officers, the firefighters, the emergency personnel who rushed into harm's way as we were all trying to find safety. They risked their lives and in many cases gave their lives in order to make us safe. And today, as we are here, there are still thousands, hundreds of thousands of our soldiers who are defending us around the world. Over 20,000 Marylanders have served since September the 11th in our military. So our thoughts and prayers are with our soldiers and their families as we commemorate the 10th anniversary of the attack against our country. Now, September 11th, 2001 was a turning point for America. It was a singular moment in our history. Most of you are too young to remember other singular moments in America's history. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. It changed America's view that we could isolate ourselves from the world problems. America, from that day forward, understood that if we are going to protect our values and our people, we have to get engaged globally. We're not going to be safe unless we work to make the world a safer place to live. And then on November 22nd, 1963, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, we understood that a strength of America is in its institutions, in its citizens, and not in any one leader. And then September the 11th, 2001, when we realized that we were vulnerable to a new type of an enemy, terrorist, and that we have to root out terrorists wherever we may find them in order to protect the homeland, to protect the people of this country. But let's be careful. The attack against our country was not an attack by one group of people. We can't demonize a religion or a creed or a nationality. We can't allow us to succumb to trying to scapegoat. And our strength will be in us being together as one community. I attended a lot of events yesterday to commemorate 9/11. There was one theme that came through every one of those events. That right after 9/11, this nation came together. We were united. We all felt like we were one, and we had to work together. Right after 9/11, I visited a mosque and I prayed. I visited a church and I prayed. I visited a synagogue and I prayed. And people genuinely worked together, understood it. Well, something's happened over the last 10 years. We've grown a little bit apart. We've got to make sure that as we commemorate the 10th anniversary, that we continue to heal, yes, but we understand we need to be united in our resolve. Now, let me just give you a couple caveats here. This is the 224th anniversary of our Constitution. A unique document, the Constitution of the United States. Think about it. Our leaders immediately attached a Bill of Rights to our Constitution. How revolutionary and how risky. 224 years ago saying our leaders believe it's okay to criticize them? Freedom of speech? How can you maintain power if you let your subjects criticize you? It was a novel idea for the time, and I wasn't there 224 years ago, but I imagine there were a lot of people who said, those Americans, they'll never survive, given those types of rights to its subjects. We not only survived, we became the model for the world, for the free world, giving basic rights to all of our citizens. We the people. Our constitutional protections, freedom of religion, freedom to express ourselves, open media, and our rights, even if we are accused of the most horrible crimes, the rights to be presumed innocent. All that built into our Constitution 224 years ago. Our Constitution has survived the division that brought on the Civil War. We came back together as a nation under the same Constitution that brought us together. It wasn't perfect from its inception, but it has been able to evolve and be the strength of this nation holding us together. The Constitution survived the onslaught of global problems during the world wars. And now the Constitution will continue to guide us as we figure out how we got to meet the new risks against America. We have new risks. We have new things we have to figure out. Cybersecurity. We didn't know about cybersecurity 224 years ago. We're under attack today from cyber criminals, cyber terrorists, and cyber spies. Soldiers from other countries are trying to attack us through cyberspace. We got to get smarter as to how we handle those issues. We are proud in Maryland that the U.S. Cyber Command is located right here at Fort Meade, Maryland. We're the epicenter for cybersecurity. I say that here because many of you may very well wish to look at careers related to cybersecurity. It's going to be a continued area of interest for this nation. Governor O'Malley has made Cyber Maryland one of our principal themes. Private companies are locating here because we've got to figure out a way to protect you from theft and invasion of your privacy through cyber. We've got to be able to protect our energy grid, our transportation grid, our military grid, and our private companies and their proprietary interests. And we have to do that in a way that doesn't stop technology growth, because first, we cannot stop technology growth, and secondly, that's part of the growth of America. So all of that becomes critically important. How do we deal with the challenges of cyber? Well, about a few years ago, we decided one of the things we had to do was to modernize our law enforcement techniques, the so-called Patriot Act. We had to do something so that law enforcement could figure out how to stay ahead of the criminals in getting information to keep you safe. The way we keep you safe today is better use of intelligence information and better use of technology. We need to do both in order to keep you safe. So our wiretap laws were written during the days, and maybe some of you have heard about this, but during the days we had landline telephone lines. That's how we used to do our wiretaps, with a stationary hard wire. Well, obviously, technology is much beyond that. So the Patriot Act was an effort to give law enforcement the tools they need to be able to track modern communication. It was abused. Law enforcement used wireless efforts to get information from you without going for the proper court oversight. They went with warrantless subpoenas, which I have a lot of problems, and I think you should have a lot of problems about. The founders of our Constitution specifically prohibited unreasonable search and seizure. Why? Because it's very careless and very easy for law enforcement with all their power to come to knock through your doors. We said that's not right. They can't knock down your door in the middle of the night unless they have some cause. But can they invade your cyber areas in the middle of the night or during the middle of the day without any supervision? Well, under the Patriot Act, there are ways that they can do that because we wanted to make sure law enforcement had adequate protection. But they've gone too far. Now we have to figure out how we can protect your privacy and still be able to give you the security that's important. Those are the types of challenges. It's a false dilemma to say that we can only protect your security if we compromise your civil liberties. That's a false choice. It's a false choice to say that the only way that we can protect your security is to make sure that we interrogate the bad guys using any method we want to use, including torture and waterboarding. We did that, and it was wrong. It was against our fundamental principles. It was against our laws. It was against international laws. And we did it, and it was wrong. It was wrong the way that we treated these horrible terrorists who we captured and put into prisons and subjected them to inhumane conduct. That was wrong. Our Constitution and our tradition tells us we can't do that. That violates the basic principles of our nation. But guess what? It not only violates the principles of America, it's also sloppy law enforcement. You don't get good information. If torture works, there's been a lot of witches over the history of our societies. People will say anything to avoid torture. You don't get good information. Now, we shouldn't torture because it's wrong, it's against our values, and we're a country where we believe in the rule of law. But it also doesn't make sense from the point of view of keeping you safe. Well, we're safer today than we were 10 years ago. We're safer today because we have brought about a better collection of intelligence information and a better use of technology. Since 9/11, we've consolidated all of the Homeland Security functions into a Department of Homeland Security. Since 9/11, we now have the sharing of intelligence information by law enforcement. I was with the former superintendent of police who told me that right the day before 9/11, as you all know, one of the terrorists was stopped for speeding in Maryland. That information was never effectively shared or used. Today, we share that information among federal agencies and among state, local, and federal agencies to keep you safer. Now, you don't know about all the successes because we don't issue press releases when we do something that keeps you safe. But we do know that we are safer today, and we've made a lot of progress. But let me tell you one way that I think we can really prepare for your safety, one thing that you can do to help us. And that is we've got to get more engaged in the international community. We've got to understand what's going on around the world better. It is said that if you speak several languages, you're multilingual. If you speak 2 languages, you're bilingual. If you speak 1 language, you're an American. We've got to change that. We've got to get engaged and understand the cultures of other areas of the world much better than we do today. We've got to get engaged. I chair the International Development Subcommittee of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. That's the committee that's responsible for U.S. foreign aid. And the United States gives a lot of your tax dollars away to help develop other countries. We give tens of billions of dollars away every year. A lot of money. Do you know what percentage of your federal budget is spent in foreign aid? Well, we've done some surveys. Most Americans believe it's somewhere between 20 to 25% of the federal budget is in international development of foreign aid. It's less than 1% of the federal budget. Less than 1%. Now, we spend a lot of your tax dollars for our military to keep us safe. It would be a better investment to work on stability of countries in order to keep you safe. So why should we be engaged? Why should we help other countries? Sure, there's a humanitarian need, but let me just bring it more to our self-interest. Stability of other countries help us. If countries are stable, they won't breed terrorists. If people have hope, they'll control their own destiny. Arab Spring was real, is real. What happened in Tunisia, what happened in Egypt, What happened in Libya, people wanted control of their own destiny. And there are two basic things here, and we should realize you can't do one without the other. One is people do want to elect their own leaders. They do want basic human rights. They do want the opportunity to be able to speak out without being sent to prison. They do want some of the values that we so cherish here in America. And that is lacking in many countries in the world. But there's a second part to this. The young people who were protesting in Tunisia and in Egypt, they were doing that because they wanted economic justice. They wanted a paycheck. They wanted to be able to take care of their families. They wanted to see economic justice in their country. They saw their leaders living in palaces and the privileged having all the wealth and all the rights, and the people of the nation being denied basic subsistence. So economic justice needs to go along with the basic right to choose your leader and human rights. I'm the Senate chair of the United States Helsinki Commission, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. It was formed in the 1970s, includes all the countries of Europe and Central Asia, the former republics of the Soviet Union, Canada and the United States. And we have relationships with many other countries around the world, including many countries in the Mediterranean and the Middle East. It's based upon three basic principles: the principles of human rights, the principles of security, and the principles of economic rights. It's a voluntary agreement. It's consensus. All the countries have agreed to those three basic core principles. The view is, and the point is, you can't have security unless you have human rights. You're not going to have basic human rights unless you have economic rights. If you don't have economic rights, you're not going to have security. The three are very much interrelated. And the United States needs to be engaged in other countries. It's in our interest to get these countries to be stable countries. So that's why we get involved. That's why we get involved. Economic stability will be critically important for whether we achieve the type of stability in the troubled parts of the world that give us the best chance to be safe in our homeland against extremists and terrorists. Let me just give you a couple examples of what we are trying to do on the economic front. Our economic strategies are based upon sustainability of countries. It's interesting, many countries, particularly in Africa, but also in the Middle East, have mineral wealth. They have oil, they got copper, they got diamonds, they got gold, they got lots of mineral wealth. But it's generally known to be a mineral curse because the mineral wealth doesn't get to the people. It finances corruption within their governments because these are secret contracts between the international, multinational mineral companies and the corrupt leaders of these third world nations. We're doing something about that. In the Dodd-Frank bill, a provision that I authored now requires our gas and oil companies to list publicly their contracts on taking mineral wealth out of other countries so that we can trace the money and see where it's going. We've adopted an international effort known as the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative that uses best practices, and more countries are voluntarily requiring the disclosure of their mineral contracts. We're making progress on transparency because you can't have stability in a country unless you deal with rooting out corruption in that country. One other area that we have to work very aggressively on is gender equity. You're not going to have peace in a country unless you treat your women right. Most of these countries are dependent upon agriculture. And in many of these countries, women are basically slaves in the production of agriculture. There is not land reform. Women can't own land. We've got to change that. In America's foreign policy, the way we use our international development assistance needs to be tied into gender equity reforms. And we are making progress in all of these areas. My purpose for bringing all this up is that, yes, I know we all talk about how we have to defend the right at the ballot in all of these countries, and we do. We want to have free and open elections. But a free and open election will not guarantee stability in a country unless we also work for economic stability. So for America, to me, the lessons of 9/11, the lessons of our Constitution still being as relevant today as it was 224 years ago, is that our values are the right values. If we're going to keep this nation safe, if we're going to keep each of our communities safe, we've got to be united, we've got to work together, we can't scapegoat. But we also need to understand that the basic values of America is what keeps us safe. We can't compromise our basic values. The way that we treat people, whether they are terrorists or whomever they may be within our criminal justice system, they're entitled to basic rights. The way we treat our own citizens on their rights of privacy, and the way that we engage internationally, starting from that attack against our country on December 7th, 1941. The threat today is different than it was in 1941, but it's still as serious. And we must get engaged more internationally. The values of our nation on providing stability to other countries is critically important, and each one of you can make a difference. The great thing about America, the great thing, is that any one person can make a difference, and each of us can make a difference. Your engagement on these issues will help keep your family safe, help keep our community safe, and will help America to continue to grow and be the great power it is for good around the world. Thank you all very much. I'd be glad to, in the time that remains, and I'm not exactly sure the time you all have. I'm sure I'm holding you up for some other classes, but I'd be glad to try to answer some questions. So I'm not sure if we have. Okay, we have a question.
My question is, you want to keep America safe. The defense budget is now 4% of GDP. During the Kennedy-Eisenhower years, it was 10% of GDP. Why do you think we can continue to drop defense spending?
Great question. I don't know your percentages. I'll take it as being accurate that 4% we're spending of GDP on military today. I assume you mean DOD, Department of Defense? Yeah. Whereas when John Kennedy was president, we were spending 10% of our GDP on defense. First of all, when we consider the defense budget, we should take a look at our security budget. Most of it, 95% of it, is in the Department of Defense. That is our soldiers and the equipment they need. The smallest parts are in the Department of State, our civilian and economic efforts, the ones I've already told you about on the economic front, which are also part of our national security budget. But let me take the Department of Defense budget and take issue with your statement. America spends more on defense than every other nation in the world combined. America spends more on defense than every other nation in the world combined. You tell me how we're going to maintain our economic strength if we use so much of our economy for defense. I will not compromise our security. I will make sure we have all the soldiers we need and they have all the modern equipment they need and our veterans have the benefits that we've promised them. That is not negotiable. We have to do that. But there are many, many other countries in the world, and they need to step up to the plate. It's not right for the United States to be the police force for the world. And we saw that, I think, most effectively displayed in Libya. It was right, now some here will disagree, it was right for the international community to take steps against Colonel Gaddafi, who was murdering his own people. The civilized world said it's enough is enough. Their neighbors said we can't take this anymore. And the international community through the United Nations was prepared to take steps. But the United States did not have to be in the lead, and we were not in the lead. We participated. We didn't have to have boots on the ground, and we didn't put boots on the ground. And we have effectively brought about a transition. Whether that will satisfy our two standards of a country that respects the rights of its citizens and is economically viable, we'll see. My point is this. I don't think it's practical. I don't think it's affordable. I don't think it's effective for the United States to try to police the entire world. We've got to look strategically at where we have troops today and say whether this is reasonable. I'll tell you this. If you were president of the United States and you were able to bring all your chess players home and all of our soldiers came home, and you're now looking at where you would deploy the soldiers we have, you would not put 100,000 plus in Afghanistan today. You wouldn't. Afghanistan is not a risk to America. Terrorists are not operating in Afghanistan. It's not a stable country, I'll grant you that. Has lots of corruption. That's clear. So I think we've got to be a lot smarter with our military, and that we should not look at trying to dramatically increase our military budgets. We need to engage the international community. The threat against America is not the traditional threats. The threats against America are now these terrorist-type activities, these rogue governments, and these rogue individuals, and we have to have greater mobility. I question whether we need all the military facilities that we have scattered around the world the way we have in the past. But thank you for that question. It is very thought-provoking, and I know this will be one that we will be continuing to debate as we go into a presidential election cycle. Yes?
You talked about economic stability around the world. Yet in Washington, we're trying to get our own economic house in order. How do you balance those two issues?
Right. Good question. When we're complaining about economic stability in the Middle East, how about economic stability here in America? Let me just assure you of one basic fact. The American economy is a strong economy. It's having serious problems right now, and we've got to fix it. I think President Obama is absolutely right when he says that we have to out-educate, out-innovate, and out-build our competitors. We've got to invest in education. Education is too expensive, including here. It shouldn't be as expensive as it is to attend a community college. So we have to work on making education more accessible and better quality education, particularly pre-K through 12, because other countries are doing better than we are. And if we're going to continue to lead the world, we have to do a better job in education. We've got to do a better job in rebuilding America. Our airports are not as modern as other countries' airports. We're still using radar to track our aircraft rather than GPS. That's amazing when you think about that. We waste literally hundreds of millions of dollars in jet fuel because we don't have the most efficient routes for our aircraft. We got to change that. We have bridges that are falling down. We got energy infrastructure that doesn't give us the capacities that we need. Every storm, too many homes are out of electricity. We got to change that system. There are better ways. We got to have fast trains. We got to have so many things we need to do. And we have to out-innovate. America's always been the innovation capital of the world. Always has been the innovation capital of the world. More patents, more trademarks, where healthcare discoveries have been made, where communication discoveries, energy discoveries, solar and wind power, all that came from America, from this country. We've got to continue to out-innovate the world by investing in research, investing in technology. So we've got to do that. At the same time, we've got to bring down the unemployment rates. The best way to balance our federal budget is get more people employed. When people are out of work, they use more governmental services and they pay less taxes. You get people working, less governmental support, more revenues, budgets come into balance. Create jobs. President Obama's right. I'm not telling you that as a Democrat. I'm telling you that as anybody who has taken Economics 101 will tell you, you've got to get people back to work. You've got to do things that will create more jobs here in America. At the same time, we've got to bring our budget back into balance. I've done that before. In 1995, working with President Clinton, we balanced the federal budget. It was balanced 11 years ago. We had huge surpluses. We've got to get our budget back in balance. And that means you've got to cut spending where it's not productive. In my view, we can save a lot of money in defense by just using a baseline that assumes that our troops are coming home from Afghanistan and Iraq according to the timelines we've already set in place. And by the way, we need to bring in more revenue. We leak too much revenue. Just so you understand, we spend more money in our revenue code than we bring in. If we eliminated all the tax breaks, we would have tax rates 1/2 of what we have today. Just give you one example of a revenue giveaway that I think is totally wrong. The gas and oil companies. They get a tax break. They get a tax break for manufacturing a product for export. They don't manufacture a product for export. And yet they get billions of dollars for that. Here's an industry that made $34 billion during the first 3 months of this year, as gasoline prices at the pump were going up and all of our economy was suffering. They had record profits. They don't need a handout from the government. So if you put all that together in a reasonable plan, you can bring our budget into control, but it starts with creating jobs. That's the most important thing you can do, is create jobs. Now, will we get it done this year? We might. I think the people of this country are fed up with the partisan division in Washington. I think they're fed up with people who don't want to sit down and work out fair compromises. I can tell you that as strongly as I feel about different issues, I think it's important that our system work. And it's time that Democrats and Republicans work together, put the national interest first, create the jobs that we need, have a responsible blueprint on our budget, and allow our nation to continue to grow. The most important thing that the private sector needs is predictability. The most important thing. We give them the ground rules, Congress acts, and I can tell you our economy will take off and will continue to lead the world. I'm optimistic about our future on that. Yes?
If your education budget would be better regulated if you were to get rid of No Child Left Behind?
The question deals with whether we would be better off if we got rid of No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind was an initiative under George W. Bush that brought two things into place. One, it established education, pre-K through 12, as a national priority. And secondly, said that in addition to providing the resources, we need to demand accountability. No child should be promoted just because they reach a certain age. They have to achieve certain results. Schools that fail should be closed. Children should be given opportunities to attend a performing school so that they can get the advantages of a quality education. I don't know of anyone who disagrees with that concept. I mean, I think that's absolutely where the federal government should be. Education should be a national priority. The resources should be made available, and there needs to be accountability in the system. The problem was once the bill was passed, the president and the administration didn't fund it, didn't provide the tools. So we had no chance for schools that were failing to be able to get the resources they need so that they could achieve the results that we wanted them to. Secondly, we used one model of accountability nationwide rather than allowing the accountability models to be developed locally. Now, we've made some modifications in this, but I think it is time to rethink the way this bill has been put together. I think we need significant changes in No Child Left Behind. However, I don't want to lose the three basic principles, and that is that we need to make sure that education is a national priority. There has to be the resources provided at the federal level so that every school has a chance to achieve, and you do have to have accountability in education. Yes, sir.
There's been a lot of talk that I'm hearing for the past 2 years since the ascension of a certain third party, or supposed third party, about privatization of a lot of the functions like public education the government is now in charge of. And I was just like public works, public education. I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Well, no, I don't think it's a third party. I think there is a large segment that is trying to privatize as many governmental activities as possible on the Republican side of the aisle. Something I disagree with. I think there is importance, accountability in the programs that we provide. A good example is public education. I don't know the exact numbers. I think it's somewhere between 85 to 90% of our children are educated in our public school system. We need to make sure that we have quality public education in America. When you look historically as to what was one of the turning factors why America became the economic engine for the world, you look at our public education system. We've got to return to those days and improve public education. Also, on so many of the public works, with government services, you have accountability. I don't think anybody's suggesting that we privatize our military, but maybe they are. I mean, we tend to privatize services that are critically important to maintain the type of accountability of public service. Now, if it is a private function, then it should be done by the private sector. If it's a public function, it should be done by government. Now, I don't want people who are depending upon their Social Security checks to try to reach a private company, perhaps located halfway around the world, to get their answers. I mean, too many of our service industries today are providing their services from outside the United States. We don't want to see that happen to the services, governmental services. Yes?
Do you think that the Obama's on the job plan to kickstart the economy by spending money on rebuilding the infrastructure and creating jobs that way? Good workable idea, and do you think it actually has a chance of getting passed?
I think the president is right on his initiatives. That is, what he's trying to do is basically create jobs in 4 different areas. One is the rebuilding of America, our roads, our bridges, our schools. The second is to tell employers, if you hire people who are long-term unemployed, we're going to give you a tax break. I think that makes sense. If you've been unemployed for a while, it's hard to get a job. The old adage is true. It's easier to get a job if you're employed, a new job, than if you're unemployed. So targeting job credits to those people who don't have jobs today, to me, makes sense. It also reduces the needs for unemployment insurance, which is also a drain on our economy. The third is to help small businesses. More jobs are created by small businesses, more innovation by small businesses. And the third area is to have a level playing field on trade. We give away a lot of jobs on trade. China, for example, manipulates its currency to get about a 35% discount. How do you compete against a company that can get, or country you can get a 35% discount over what you can sell a product for? We've got to enforce our trade rules, and I think that's an important part of it. And the important thing about the proposal, it's got to be done in conjunction with the budget. So whatever we do will be part of our overall strategy to manage the deficit. Can it get passed? I think it can. I think the American people want jobs. And I really do think there's going to be more and more price to pay for ignoring the will of the public on 2 things. 1, Democrats and Republicans working together, compromising, and 2, create jobs, get our economy back on track. So I think that's going to be the message coming out of this fall, I hope. And remember, we're still 14 months away from the election, so it's too early to be talking about voters. We've got to be talking about getting our country back at work. Why don't I take one more question, and hope it's a friendly one to end up with? Yes?
How do you plan overseeing women's equality overseas?
Women's equality?
Equality overseas.
Overseas. It's a great question. It's one of my highest priorities, gender equity issues and progress. We've done it a lot of different ways. First of all, I want you to know that Secretary Clinton, I think, is doing an incredible job on gender equity issues. And that we can be very proud of the role that she has played internationally in regards to women's rights. Secondly, we put it into our aid program. We put contingencies in the aid program. In Afghanistan, our aid is contingent upon demonstrable progress being made in the worst country in the world. I don't think that's an overstatement. Afghanistan could be the worst country in the world in the way it treats women. And we have put specific requirements in our aid programs, and we now have women who are starting to emerge in government. We are having women who are now in schools. We're having a more understanding policy on women's public participation. It's still a long way to go, but we are making those issues. On every country we deal with on Feed the World is a new initiative. We have land reform as part of it. We are working with countries to change their land laws so that women have the right to own property, and we are making progress. So the answer is accountability. You don't go into a country. You're going to have tough love here. If a country doesn't participate in reform, we got to pull our aid and our international recognition. We can't give them the appearance that they're making progress if they're not making progress. And we got to be prepared to pull out of countries that are not responding, not to what we want to see done, but to basic international standards. And gender equity issues are internationally recognized standards. The United Nations has declared that, so we are on sound ground to demand that basic human rights. Let me conclude on a note that when I look out here and I see you all interested in this type of subject during your constitutional forum, it really does give us hope for our future. Our Constitution is the model of the world. I can't tell you how many countries come in here and try to figure out how we do things. They want to copy our system. They want to find out how we were able to get all the pieces together the way we have in this country. And I am optimistic about America's future. I do believe we'll find the way to get our economy back the way it should be, to create the type of jobs that we need, and continue to be engaged internationally for a safer world, protecting you against the threats to our homeland. I think we will achieve all those goals, and I'm more optimistic about it when I come here and see students interested, faculty interested in these subjects, willing to get involved, willing to get engaged. With your engagement, we have a much better chance of dealing with these problems in a successful way. So I think America will continue to lead the world. We'll do everything we can to keep you safe, and I think you're safer today and you'll be safer tomorrow. And I thank you for giving me the honor to be here today and to represent you in the United States Senate.